Welcome back to Dirty 20, everybody. Today is part 2 of our series on alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons. Today we look at my personal 2 favorite alternatives that I am desperate to try. Let's get on with the show. Star Wars is a behemoth of a franchise in terms of films, TV shows, computer games, animated series, books, you name it, they make it, including role-playing games. Now, there have been different versions of Star Wars RPG for a long time, including one originally written by the people who made Dungeons and Dragons. Currently, the one that seems to be most in vogue is one produced by Fantasy Flight Games called Star Wars the RPG. Now, unfortunately, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You see, Fantasy Flight Games have games such as X-Wing, which is a miniature starfighter dogfighting kind of game. You've also got Armada, which is more large-sized capital ships, star destroyers versus Mon Cal cruisers, things like that. They also do Star Wars Legion, which is a war game, a skirmish war game, about 28mm, which looks really cool. But when it comes to the RPG, they've done an interesting thing. They've divided the game into 3 books. Now, their claim is that they have 3 different games. Technically not true. What they have is 3 core books, but unlike D&D, where you have a Dungeon Master's Guide, a Monster Manual, and a Player's Handbook, here you have the core rules are the same in each of the books. You have Age of Rebellion, which focuses mostly on rebels versus Imperials. The stuff that we grew up watching in the original trilogy. Then you have Edge of the Galaxy. This is more focused on the kind of smugglers and bounty hunters of the Star Wars universe. Your Han Solos, Boba Fett's, Lando Calrissians, stuff like that. Then you have Force and Destiny. And this is obviously more focused on the Jedi. Now, if you were to buy all 3 books, a lot of the stuff in them would be repeated. You would have different classes and some different options, weapons, vehicles, things like that, but not exactly 3 entirely different books. Now, that's not to say that Wizards of the Coast hasn't also been accused of reprinting things. Look at, for example, the Adventurer's Guide to the Sword Coast, or the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which had a bunch of subclasses and feats that ended up in other books being reprinted. So I understand it's a business, companies have to make money. Another thing I'm not entirely crazy about with the Star Wars role-playing game is the fact that they have specific dice that you have to use for the game. So as opposed to most RPGs, particularly in the modern age, that tend to use a D20 system, so a D20, D12, D10, D8, D6, and D4, this one uses similar shaped dice, like a D8 shape, the kind of diamond shape to it, but they have specific symbols on them. Now, in the books, they have conversion tables, which mean that you can just roll a D8 and then look up this table and say, okay, well, if I rolled a 1, then it means these symbols. That's fine, but I think it probably would slow the game down a little bit, so I'm not too crazy about that. Having said that, it makes it sound like I don't like this game. I love this game. I think this game looks absolutely fantastic. The idea of being able to tell your own stories in the Star Wars universe is super exciting. And I'm definitely going to be trying this game out very soon. The last game that I want to talk about today is called Deadlands. Now, I'm a massive fan of the Western genre. Films like Bone Tomahawk and Ravenous are genuinely some of my all-time favorites. And Deadlands gives you this sense of a time and a place, but it adds all these really cool elements like eldritch horror, steampunk, alternate history. Now, all of these things wrapped together make for a very interesting RPG for me. I recognize that it's probably not for everyone. A lot of people don't really enjoy westerns, but having said that, if you like your horror and your alternate history, this game is worth trying out. So the canonical setting for Deadlands is often referred to as Weird West because of its mixture of horror and western genres. The history of the Weird West is identical to our own history up until July 3rd, 1863. On this date, a Sioux shaman performs a ritual in order to try and get rid of the Europeans that are invading their lands. And what they do is they release these entities. These entities are known as reckoners, and the time after this ritual that happens is called the Reckoning. Now, if Star Wars can be described as confusing, then Deadlands can only really be described as a bit of a hot mess. The original game was published back in about 1996. It won a whole bunch of awards, and basically it was converted to different systems a number of times. So you have the classic rules, the revised classic rules, you have the GURPS rules, you have the reloaded, and recently they just did another version of the game where they're using Savage Worlds as their base rules. Other than the kind of setting and vibe of Deadlands, there's a couple of things that I really like about the game. For example, spellcasters are known as hucksters, and the players actually use playing cards when they are casting their spells. They have to draw cards, and that has an impact on the spell that they're trying to cast. There's also a mechanic called fate chips. Now, this is not necessarily that unlike Inspiration in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but one thing that I really like is that you use poker chips. And it's all to do with you blindly picking some poker chips, and depending on the color that they are, whether it's a green poker chip, a red one, or a blue one, or whatever you've got, then they have different effects. All in all, for me, the thing that attracts me to Deadlands is the kind of Western setting. But if the Western setting isn't necessarily for you, or you wanted to try a Western setting but weren't really huge on learning all the rules to this new system, then you could try, there's homebrew versions of a kind of Western style for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But here I'm trying to encourage people to maybe try something different, as, you know, sometimes we can get stuck in the D&D is the greatest game ever invented and nothing matches up to it, which is patently not true. The greatest thing you can get from trying these different systems, I think, is that you might try something and say, well, you know, it was fun, but I wouldn't necessarily want to play in it, or I like D&D more than I like that system. But you're definitely going to be able to get some hints, get some ideas from another system that might improve the game for you and your group. So these have been some alternatives to Dungeons & Dragons. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Give us a like, give us a subscribe if you did. And are there any systems that you really liked that I should have taken a look at? Or what are some systems that you would like to try out? If D&D is your favorite RPG, then why is it your favorite RPG? Thank you so much for listening, and keep slaying. If you've enjoyed this content, then please smash that like button, subscribe, share this around online, and come and visit our website, www.lavictoriaproductions.com, to see all our past episodes, as well as our blog posts and all the stuff that we're currently working on at La Victoria Productions. Why not reach out to us and tell us what you think of our videos? You can reach us on Twitter At Mouth La Victoria is our producer. We are also on Instagram. I am Enano LVP, and our producer is Jazzy J. Cherot. We're also La Victoria Productions on Facebook and LinkedIn. Come on by and let us know what you think.